It's 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. Yeah,
I've been
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, you
So
like it?
I like Switzerland very much.
Yeah.
I did some when I was teaching in Graz. I taught in Lucerne,
I
the
just wanted
school
to
there.
ask. I saw that somewhere. That was
Yeah,
true, huh?
yeah. It
Hmm.
was. I would go. I forget. It was maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I would go like maybe a couple of days, something like that, and
Hmm.
then back to Graz. So I was kind of making
Ah,
it
okay.
just for that short
See.
period. It was nice. It was. First of all, I loved the city, and it was interesting dealing with the different kinds of students as I did with Graz as opposed to in Lucerne, the whole different situation. But it was really nice. I really enjoyed it.
Uh, Very interesting. Yeah. And like, did you like the lake probably, right in Lucerne? Like
I
you
didn't
hang
get a
out at the
chance
lake.
well, I didn't get a chance to do that much
I see.
sightseeing. To be honest with you,
Mm.
I'm not a great sightseer, you know. But I
Mm.
really didn't have the time. By the time we did all the teaching and I had something to eat, I just would just chill out. I was my
Mm.
no hardcore partying, nothing like that.
Right, right. So that era ended. That Graz Lucerne
Yeah, I
time.
think it
Yeah.
ended. Yeah, let me see. Let me think now. I did 7 years there. And I think it ended
Okay.
about right before the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic started,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a year or so before the whole COVID thing hit.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very enjoyable. I really liked working in,
Mm-hmm.
I loved the city of Graz, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
And I really interesting students, made a lot of good friends, and there's some wonderful teachers there.
Beautiful. I
So
think
it
it's
was a
quite an
nice,
international staff there, right? The
yes,
faculty
it
in
is.
Graz. Yeah.
Yeah, Dina
Mm-hmm.
DeRose is teaching voice, is American.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Rotundi's American.
Mm-hmm.
Ed Partico is American. Ed Newmeister just retired. The new trombone teacher is Luis Bonilla, who was a student of mine in Manhattan School of Music years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's very international. Morton, the bass
Mm-hmm.
teacher's Danish, I think. So they're all
Okay.
over the place. It's good.
Right.
The students get
Yeah.
a real general overall feel of the different nationalities and the different vibe like the
Mm-hmm.
Americans give off a different vibe than the Europeans on certain things. So
Yeah.
it was really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Michael, when did you start with music? When did you actually hit a note and start making some noise?
Very young. I was maybe I don't know 4 or 5 years old. I started
Mm-hmm.
taking some piano lessons when I was. This is when I was living in Brooklyn, New York, and
Mm-hmm.
I loved playing, but I hated practicing. So when I started the piano lessons, I never really took any more piano lessons for the rest of my life. But I
I
really
see.
thoroughly enjoyed playing from the word go. Because my father was a guitarist
Mm-hmm.
played like Freddie Green, like the basic Freddie Green, and
Hard to
he had
find
his
these days. Yeah.
yeah, and he had a lot of good records. He had a lot of bassy records,
Mm-hmm.
Ellington, Benny Goodman. So the music was always music around, and he
Mm-hmm.
had a big band that worked in the New York area.
Mm-hmm.
But he was also a barber, so he would come home from a gig like 2 in the morning and open up his shop at 6. And then
See.
finally he had to stop. That was getting a little
Mm-hmm.
too crazy. But I
Mm-hmm.
really started. I really loved playing from the word go. I really love playing.
Mm-hmm. And you played piano with Maynard Ferguson's band, or
Ye-
you arranged as well, or what was that? I'm not sure
Yeah,
if I understood correctly.
yeah. Now I first of all, but just to back up a little bit, when we
Mm-hmm.
moved from Brooklyn to an area called Farmingdale, Long Island, and I went into a high school called Farmingdale High School, and the dance band, the student dance band, when I went in to hear that, it knocked me out. It was like my epiphany. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get over kids my age playing that well and playing some good charts.
Mm-hmm.
So the student who was graduating, she was leaving, and the band director Marshall Brown. I played for him. He liked the way I played, but my sight reading was horrible. So the whole summer, he said, if you can get your sight reading together, basically got the gig.
Mm-hmm.
So I really worked hard practicing my sight reading, and in the meantime, I got interested in figuring out arranging. I never had any formal lessons in arranging, but
Okay.
I just want to move that story. I had the same Marshall Brown when he was fired from the school because he was playing too much jazz. He and George Wein from the Newport Festival started a youth band called the Newport Youth Band. And I was 16 at the time. But some of the members of the band, just to give you an idea, some serious heavy players: baritone saxophonist Ronnie Cuba, bass player Eddie Gomez, the drummer was Larry Rosen, who became GRP Records. Nat Pavona played lead with Maynard and Buddy Rich and Basie. It goes on and on. I mean, it was at least half the band was
I heard about that
some
band.
serious guys.
Pictures,
Alan Rubin, it was Mr. Fabulous, the original Blues Brothers, part of the original Blues Brothers band. So, and then I was playing with, when the Newport band broke up, I started playing with trumpeter Don Ellis, who was living in New York at the time with a quartet. And that's how I got on Maynard's band, basically. And I joined Maynard's band in 1961.
As a piano player.
As a piano, and I did a lot of writing for the band. But the pianist on the band at the time, Jackie Byard, who's the one who recommended me to Maynard. So I jumped at the opportunity. I went to Manhattan School of Music for 1 year, but it was kind of weird. The jazz education at the time was not obviously what it is today. So it was kind of boring, and I was already playing professionally. So it was a great excuse. Yeah. I told my father, I'm cutting out of school, I'm joining Maynard's band, and I was on the road. And it was a great experience. I really had a great time, plus a lot of writing. So
it was. What about the writing? That came naturally to you, or you had the hero that was arranging and you wanted to do the same, or something like that? Or
Well, my heroes, basically, I have no specific sacred people, but I do like my early influences with Duke Ellington, Billy Strayhorn, Gil Evans, and another guy people don't know who I love dearly is George Russell. And I just did a lot of trial and error method in writing. And before I was too young to drive, when I would write something, my father would drive me to the rehearsals just so I could hear the music. So I would play the piano 28 hours a day and write 29 hours a day. I was just totally focused, really totally focused. Nothing else mattered. Still doesn't in a way.
And are you a guy that writes on the piano or just in the airplane, wherever you are? Or
I've written away from the piano, definitely. But
away from the piano.
Yeah, I like writing at the piano because, and Jim McNeely and I spoke about this because he's also obviously an amazing pianist. The piano is not really the piano, so it's just I can't think of the term now, but that's not the piano. That's the strings, or that's the trumpets, or that's the reeds. So I like sitting there and just you don't have to be a piano player to write the way I write on the piano. Anybody can do that. Yeah. But it's a lot of time and effort, and I love it.
I wanted to ask you about I'm not sure exactly what your part was in those GRP projects with that big band, what chart you did, because I listened to all that stuff, and I would like to know where I heard your part in it. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Well, first of all, I had done a lot of producing for GRP, and like I said, Larry Rosen, who was on the Newport, we were very good friends, and we were until the day he passed, unfortunately. And he got me into producing. I never even thought about it. So I did some of the products I produced. I did not have any involvement as far as an arranger, but the GRP stuff I also produced along with my wife Gretchen, who took care of she was in charge of the budgets, and she had the hard job. I had the easy job. I just had to write the music. But I did, on the first album, we did 3 recordings. The first album, I think I did, Sister Sadie.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, Sister Sadie. I got to think for a second. The second album, which was a live album in Tokyo, they re-recorded Sister Sadie again and did the chart on Olio. And I think there was one other chart on that record. And then the last recording, I did, it was like an all blues concept. So I did the Cooking at the Continental, the Horace Silver tune, Mysterioso, which featured Michael Brecker and Chick Corea at the time, which when Chick passed away, I put it on Facebook to let people hear that particular track. So I did 3, I think I did three on each recording. And it was great. I mean, it was fun. Everybody was so into doing those recordings with the band, because when you you have people like Randy Brecken, Arturo Sandoval, and Chuck Finley, and Tom Scott. I mean, you got some, and Weckel and Penatucci. You got some serious guys who also loved doing the project. It was beside a great musical thing, it was a great social thing for everybody to hang out. Because a lot of times, because of being involved, people living on different coasts, you don't get to see one another. You hear one another, but you don't get to see one another a lot of times. So it was really fun. It was great. But it was a great experience dealing with GRP, with Dave Grusin and Larry, and just great people who worked there also in the art department and the whole. It's a very successful company. Very successful.
So it happened through Larry Rosen, because he was your friend. So the whole thing, the whole GRP started with Larry in your case for you.
Yeah, with Larry and Dave, basically two of them, Larry Rosen and Dave Grusin. And they started the company real small, got bigger and bigger. And like I said, at some point he asked me, the first record I produced was something called Digital Duke, which was a digital version of the Ellington Band, which at the time I think was one of the first digital recordings. And it won a Grammy for Mercer Ellington, which was nice. It was fun. Especially with some of the Duke Ellington, actual Duke Ellington members who were still alive played on it. And it was a lot of fun. It was great history. And it was really a lot of fun doing those things. And it started there. And then I started doing stuff with different artists, Dave Valentine, Billy Cobham, Eddie Daniels. So it started to kind of develop for me. But I really, and as I said, Larry and I were very close on the youth band, and we were very close until the end.
All right, he played in the Newport.
Yeah,
you just mentioned, right? So you know each other a long time.
Oh my God, yes. Since we were like young teenagers. Same with Eddie Gomez and Ronnie Cuban, since we were young teenagers.
And do you by now have, like, when you're composing something, arranging, do you all by pencil and copying every part, or you're using technology, or you have some assistants that make?
Okay, here's my technology. I write by hand. All my scores are.
Oh, that's the real stuff. There, right there. Yeah.
And I scan it to one of my sons, who then scans it to whoever's copying. But my scores and even my copying, which I did years ago, was horrible. I hate copying, and I don't use a computer. I tried doing it a number of years ago, and then I stopped for about 6 months, and then for me to start again, it was too. I just didn't have the patience. So I'm like one of the dinosaurs, I guess.
Yeah, beautiful. But so the GRP charts for the big band, they're all handwritten.
Not all. Some of the writers did. I can't remember who did the hand and who used the computer. I don't remember. But my wife, who was one of the busier music copyists, this was still at that time it was still all hand copying. It wasn't computer copying. So she was in charge of all the copyists. Whoever did the charts, whether it was Dave Grusin or Mincer or Tom Scott, she was in charge. So in those days, in fact, to this day, a lot of the musicians still like to read hand copying as opposed to computer copying.
Yeah. So your wife learned how to write beautifully with the calligraphy.
Oh yeah, she's an artist. She's an artist. And then she hasn't copied now in years. Our youngest son was copying for a number of years for me personally and for WDR, but he hasn't been doing that. So any copying now will be sent over. It all depends who's. If I did something for the Lothian Radio Big Band, so their copyists copied the music.
Okay, I see.
But now they were using. Now we went to the computer copying stage. In those days, when we did those recordings with GRP, it was still the hand copying era. Which, thank God, as long as I don't have to copy. Yeah.
Interesting. And how did the WDR big band gig came about?
Well, I think it was one of the at the times it was one of the IAJE, the International Jazz Educators, was still happening, and the band played in New York. I forget, Bill Dobbins was the musical director, was a wonderful musician and a wonderful pianist. And they were playing, and then, so of course, the producer, the manager at the time was a gentleman named Wolfgang Hirschbaum. And so, of course, when the concert was over, everybody wanted to talk to him to get a gig with the band, you know. So I just laid back, and my wife just kind of went up and started talking to him, and they hit it off. And she brought me over to Wolfgang and said, "We'd love to have you." Some of the guys in the band knew of me. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the guys in the band came in and said, "Man, we'd love to have you over here." So I went over and did my first project with them when this manager, Wolfgang, was still, as I said, was still the manager. And it's kind of, I guess, love at second or third sight. And that when they offered me the position, I was more than happy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Wolfgang, I don't know if you know this man. He's a wonderful recording engineer. He was in charge of recording the Kenny Clark Fonzie Boland recordings. If you're into that, the producer was Gigi Compy, and so Wolfgang was the man with that. Okay. And now he's long since retired, but wonderful guy. And he was so great to me when I went there the first time. Mm-hmm. And then when I was offered the gig, I had to think about it because I was there. I mean, I always lived here in the States, but I was going back and forth so much that we actually kept an apartment in Cologne. So it saved me a lot of hassle with moving a lot of clothes and everything. So I was there 11 year gig, and it was a great gig.
Yeah, you were there for how many years, on and off?
11.
11.
Elf. I've been trying to practice my German.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it's for me. It would be interesting if you can share, if you want to share a little bit how that big apparatus is working with that big band. You know, like, did you choose the music, or who is deciding which guests are can get in front of the band and take a solo, or all that kind of stuff? What's happening and how it is happening with you as a leader there?
No, but it was a mutual thing. Like I would go to the manager at the time. It was Lucas Schmid, and I would go to him and say, "I'd like to bring such and such an artist over," and he would either agree or say, "Well, no, or whatever." He would, like when I brought Joe Lovano over, Randy Brecker, John Schofield, we would agree on the artist. Obviously, no matter what I feel, he's the manager. He still has to make that final decision. Sometimes he would come to me and say, "I'd like you to, I'm thinking about doing a project with this artist. Do you want to do that project?" And I would say yes or no. And as far as the choice of music, when we decided on the artist, then generally I, along with the artist, would pick the music. So it would be between myself and the artist. So you had to write
new charts.
Yeah. So, as far as then getting to know the soloist, it's like with any band, when you start writing for a band, you're writing for a saxophone player and you're writing for a trumpet player. After a while, you start knowing what soloists are strong at certain kinds of grooves. You know, this guy's a great ballad player, this guy's a great this, and some guys are good on both things. And you start to, now you're writing for that particular person. You're not just writing for the second tenor player, in other words, which really makes it a lot easier when you're writing for a band that you're working with a good amount of time. So that was really a lovely part of it, that you know, when you're writing, so like with Duke Ellington, he was always writing for a particular member of the band. He's always writing for someone in the band. Same here, after a while, that's what I felt like. I was writing for specific people, and I knew, I'm going to do this particular chart. This person or that person will be the best for this piece. So it was great. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I hated to, but after 11 years, as I still go back as a guest, But
how long are those? How long is that period when you conduct the band? Let's say during those 11 years, you went there for a month or for a week, or?
No, it started off to be maybe one project a month or one every 6 weeks. But then sometimes I would wind up doing 2 or 3 projects in a row. So I would be there for maybe 6 weeks. Then I'd be home for a month. Then I go back for 2 weeks. Then I'd be home for 3 weeks, and I go back for 4 weeks. It was no specific pattern. And then I was constantly writing, which was great. I was constantly writing. So like I had an office in the main building, and then as soon as I would finish rehearsal, I would go upstairs and start working on the next project. It was constant. It was constant. It was great.
That was including like rehearsals, like recordings in the same room, probably there.
Yeah, we're recording in the same room at the time. And the thing is, it all depended on the artist and also the budget. Like certain budgets would let us have more rehearsal time than other artists. It all depends, like I say, what the artist was or the manager was asking for in the way of a fee. So sometimes we would do something, rehearse for a few days without the artist, and then the artist would come in for 2 or 3 days, and sometimes you'd have a thing where the artist could be there for 10 days, which was always nicer actually, unless I knew the artist. Like
luxury.
Like when we worked with Diane Reeves. I mean, I knew her and I knew how she sounded, so we rehearsed a week without her, and then she came in, and it's like very minor in the way of fixes. So so that was great. It all depends. So we just did we just did a project recently. The recording is just coming out now with Steve Gadd and Eddie Gomez and Ronnie Cuba with the big band. So we did everything in 5 days, rehearsal, recording, bang. And it happened because of everybody's schedule. And some, like I said, sometimes it all depends on the artist. You'd be there a week to do a project. And then, of course, hopefully then there's concerts. There might be one concert, there might be 2 concerts. It all depends again on the artist and their fee. But it was always nice to have at least one concert. And preferably I always like to have at least 2 or 3 concerts. But again, that's between the manager and the artist. I mean, I can scream and yell, but it still comes down to the manager and the artist. So,
yeah, it sounds you were really sensitive to not to change the artist, but in the right different charts that fit the band and the artist. I think it was probably at sometimes quite challenging to let the artist be himself or herself, and the band should not change as well, but the end product must be something that merges together, right?
Yes, and that's the hardest part, because I found like a lot of arrangers will, when they write a chart, they kind of write a chart, and then it may not fit the artist, whether it's a singer or a horn player. So the hardest thing is that you have to fit the chart so that it's a good. First of all, it's interesting for the band, and it certainly fits the artist's profile. So with the artist, whether it's a singer or the horn player, I mean, it's tricky, and you start to learn. You have to adjust your writing and still try to, hopefully, put like a little bit of yourself in it. So they say, "Oh, I know that's I don't know who that is, but it sounds like one of Michael Abene's charts, for instance." So it's a tricky situation, but that's the fun part of it. That's
how about
really
challenging? Did you also
definitely challenging
the band and the soloists because you knew them well, so you knew maybe to push them a little bit into this side, or slightly?
And and there's certain artists that you can be a little more aggressive with. Harmonically and rhythmically, so you do that, and there's some artists that don't want to be pushed too much, but still, you still got to kind of kick them in the ass a little bit, So that's a challenging part, and it's great. I mean, I feel the same way now about writing and composing as I did when I was 14 years old. I mean, that has not changed at all.
And you said you're completely self-taught. You just listened to records and tried to figure out what was going on harmonically?
When I was a kid, when I would listen to like the Basie or the Betty Goodman records in certain bands, I was transcribed as much as possible to just kind of see what this all looked like on paper. Ellington was hard for me when I was a kid. It was really hard to transcribe some of the Ellington stuff because of his choices of colors and the way he mixed certain things. But generally, I get into it more as I get older. But that's how I learned. And and at those days, there was no really books on jazz arranging, so I would go and get like classical scores, and look at what's going on in the classical part of it, and that's how I learned how to write for orchestra the same way. I love writing for orchestra very much. I'd like to do more of it actually. And we've done some projects with big band and symphony orchestra, which is really challenging. We did that with Patty Austin, with Kurt Elling, with great Dutch singer Faye Klaassen. And that's how I learned to write for orchestra, but just looking at some of these classical scores.
Yeah. And forgive me for using the term crossover, but in which direction does it go when you have like the string players and the jazz band? What kind of approach do you have when you fix those, put those things together? What kind of style would you describe goes to music?
I don't change my style really. What I have to remember is that basically you're not going to write for a symphony orchestra as if they're a jazz band. They have definitely the orchestra has their strengths, and there's certain times you can. The way I might orchestrate, I might have like say certain violins playing with muted trumpets as a color. I might have the cellist playing with the bass clarinets, you know, and when they can't hear how it sounds because they're separated, but I can hear it, and as it comes out to the audience, it's a really great sound. I mean, I'll try anything, you know. I'm just going to go for it, and if it doesn't work, I'll fix it. But you know, sometimes it's embarrassing. But you know, I think you know, I should send you some things that I did with Paquito did it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I'll send some of that stuff to you. But yeah, it's really I love doing that.
I mean, you really learned the hard way. I mean, just by listening to figure out what's going on. If you imagine these days, the kids, they have all those books. Everything is on paper already. No need. Yeah. But there is a need to go back and really listen. But you can achieve your style, your craft without even go back to listen, just by reading those books and learning how to cluster this voicing, how to do that stuff. It's kind of you came out of the real stuff, so it's nice to hear.
Yeah, well, at that time, you know, obviously you really had not much of a choice.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I had the choice, if I would have changed my way of approaching it. To be honest with you, I think sometimes the information can get. There's so much information now that it can get confusing. And I know when I was teaching composition, you know, like in Graz especially, some very, very good young writers, but they would bring in everything on a computer score or MIDI tracked. And the problem there, I'd say, well, yeah, everything sounds good on a MIDI track, but when you put it in front of live musicians, it ain't going to sound that way. You almost have to get the sound in your head. How you know, this particular sound with certain mutes or woodwinds are going to sound. You almost got to have that in your head. And sometimes when I listen to Ellington and George Russell and Gil Evans, that sound starts to creep into your body. It kind of stays in there, and you just sit down with the paper and just try things. I mean, I'll try anything, any kind of sound, and like I said, a lot of times it works, and sometimes if it doesn't, I'll fix it. Even if it's a question of rhythms or voicing or mutes or woodwind doublings, and I'll fix it. You know, I'm not ashamed to fix something. You know.
But I guess the difference is that the kids today that were studying with you, they don't have their big band or their chances to write so often for big bands or big ensembles like you did when you came up. You could try things out, right? I guess, and you heard it back every night. This works. This doesn't work. So I think
because when I was
part of the.
Because when I was still living home with my parents, when I would write, like I said, my father would take me to any rehearsal band. I don't care who it was, you know, a 100-piece band, you know, 6 tubas. I don't care who it was. I would go and write something. And I think actually there's more opportunity for composition students in Europe to write. There's more existing bands situations like at Graz. They have I think 3 or 4 bands. Student bands, and they're playing a lot of stuff of mine, which is difficult. McNeely, Bob Brookmeyer, Thad. So the level of the bands are playing, but the young writers have more of an outlet. It's good here too. So it's good here too, but you're doing a situation. Like I said, there's some really good writers here. So I mean, people sort of my age, but younger.
Mhm.
But I think the
Mhm.
opportunities, because of the way the situation is in Europe, they have more of an opportunity to
Mhm.
hear their music played sooner. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking about when Thad Jones and Lewis played every Monday night, and I mean, with a big band, you can try those charts and it sounds tight
Yeah.
like hell. It's a different time, definitely these days with big bands
And yeah, and
yeah.
that's still playing. It's now it's called the Monday Night Big Band or the Vanguard Band. I forget what it's called.
Mm.
But yeah, it's great. I mean, I really like working with young writers. Man, I really have a
Hmm.
great time. First of all, I'm learning something too. It's
Okay.
interesting. I really kind of and the feedback, and then
Hmm.
sometimes I'll bring up certain uh, pieces of music for them that they have no idea what I'm talking about as far as writers.
Hmm.
Bill Russo with the Kent Band, or some of these other writers they may not know. Even some of the guys who wrote for Basie and for Duke, and for just names that they have never heard. I said, you really got to
Hmm.
check this out.
Hmm.
But some of that stuff, George Russell, some of the stuff he wrote in the 1950s sounds totally new today.
Hmm.
Same with Gil, stuff he wrote in the 1950s sounds totally new. Same with some of the other writers. The whole Al Cohn. I mean, I can go on and on with writers. I shall tell students to check out. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not didn't like Brookmeyer, wonderful writer, but a lot of the students only knew the more recent years of Brookmeyer.
Yeah.
I mean, I say there's some stuff Brookmeyer wrote, like for the Mulligan Band. That sounds great, man.
Mm.
Just fun, great stuff. And same with it, all of those writers. Al Cohn, I mean, it's incredible. Gary Mcfarland, one of the guys who I love dearly. Uh, Very interesting, original concept of writing.
Mm.
Apparently, unfortunately, he died young. We got to be very close friends, and I produced a lot of recordings for his company at the time, Sky
Mm.
Records. But Gary, man, a lot of these guys have no idea about Gary McFarland, and he's got his own thing. Very interesting melodic sense, very interesting harmonic sense, and very interesting way of orchestrating. Just really,
Mm.
and even the strings too. Very,
Mm.
really interesting music.
And you mentioned you went back to the classical music as well to see what those guys were doing with the half step, whole step scale. Everything was there already.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, it was funny. I'd hear a recording and I'd say, "Wow, I got this." When I was a kid, so I'd go to the store. There was a place in New York City years ago. I can't remember the name of it now. Right by Carnegie Hall. So I'd buy the scores and I'd look at what happened and realize it's a triad. And I'm thinking it sounds so fantastic. And
mhm.
it's a triad, yes, but it's like how much? It's like the weight of each note of each section. You put too many guys on a certain note,
Mhm.
it's not going to sound the same. So that's the other thing, is like having to wait. So that knocked me out. And to this day, the Bartok string quartets,
Mhm.
those things are incredible writing. But it's the other thing about when I'm writing, whether it's a big band or an orchestra, putting the amount of weight on certain notes, so you don't get an imbalance of the sound.
Mhm.
And that sometimes might take me hours to figure that out. I mean, it ain't like it in the movies. It just happens. It's a
Mhm.
lot of thought, even for and a lot of times I'll do a section of an 8 bar or section two or three versions of it. Try this,
Mhm.
reharmonize this, revoice that. Too much weight on that note. I got to do this. Moving things around, and
Yeah.
that to me is sometimes in my case makes a chart sound better.
Mhm.
Hopefully, hopefully.
And do you play the chart on the piano or sing it to the guys before they
I
play?
nah, I
Because it's just like it's just a tiny bit of information on the paper, but it's much more when you had it in your head or when you were composing. So you have to write. Are you doing very specific scores with accents, or you leave it more to the people?
yes. Well, no, I do. I am usually pretty careful about accents,
Hmm.
phrase
Hmm.
markings, dynamic
Hmm.
markings, which, of course, again, when I hear it live, might be subject to change.
Hmm.
Maybe instead of open, trumpets play a certain kind of mute instead of long note. Maybe make this note short. But basically, the chart's in my head. It's already in my head, and I try to be as specific as possible because there've been a lot of occasions when I have sent the scores over to Europe, and I'm not going to be there for the rehearsal for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like recently with this thing with the Latvian radio band, I was supposed to go over and conduct the band, but I sent the music over, and so I tried to be as specific as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then the musical director would get back to me and say, well, about phrasing, and I would go over this is all being done Zoom-wise now. I'm doing a whole project with the big band via Zoom.
Okay.
But like the WDR, a lot of times they'll know from playing my music how to phrase it.
Mm-hmm.
And
they know, but they don't know.
They do know. They know. Just they'll know. And sometimes they'll, even when I'm there, they'll make an adjustment immediately. Say, well, I'll say, gee, I wrote that note longer, but it sounds better playing than short. It's cool. So I mean, you really have to be open-minded and go in with a positive attitude and be ready to adjust. Be ready to adjust. So I mean, there's a lot involved. I mean, it's not just writing down on a score paper or a computer and sending it. It's a lot. I mean, there's this aftermath that could happen.
Yeah, I mean, my point was more like that. It's like when people play out of the Charlie Parker Omnibook, it's never going to sound like when they actually transcribe a phrase and really dig into it, right? So I thought with the charts for a big band, it's the same. It's in your head. You try to make an impression on the paper, but the people have to know what you intended to say or to express.
Yeah. But I think like I think the level of student, never mind the radio bands like the band like the VDR and bands like that, but even some of the student bands here in the colleges, their ability to understand what's on the paper is a much higher level. If I send them the same chart. Sometimes I've done stuff with college bands here that I've done with the VDR band, and they'll get pretty close as far as phrasing and knowing what to do. So it's amazing. It also saves me a lot of time. I always like to send the music ahead and any questions I will discuss with the musical director, so that when I get there, I might only have a couple of days rehearsal. So this way I'm starting, they've already played the music and they'll send it. If the tracks have been recorded, they'll listen to the track. So if I'm doing something that's already have recorded versions, I'll send the tracks to them. I'll say, this is, so you got somewhere to start. Because sometimes the band director may not be sure, but if you got the track, there's no real excuse for not getting it together. So when I come, I count off and I get out, it's it. I'm done.
And that system that they have in Germany with those radio big bands, I think it's the correct term. Did it ever exist in was the Johnny Carson big band something like that in a way, or what's comparable in the US with the radio big bands that still survive in Germany? Well,
I think the only thing I can think of offhand is the bands that are involved in the military, like the Airmen of Note, the Jazz Ambassadors. Great bands. I mean, they're really killing bands, but you have to be in the military. There are some wonderful, John Fetchuk, wonderful writer, has a rehearsal band that does some gigs. That's how Maria Schneider started. She had this rehearsal band. She kept at it, but there was no, as far as a sort of a salary position. Yes, the Johnny Carson thing, but that's a rarity. Those guys had that gig for 20 years or something like that. Now that's definitely a rarity.
Yeah, a lot of jazz players there with
Snooky
Young and all those guys.
Yeah, Snooky had Connie Condoli, man. Ernie Watts was on the band, and Pete Chrisley. Oh man, it was a great band. Band. But that's not the norm. As you know, as soon as Johnny Carson went off the air and Jay Leno come on, there was a small group again.
Yeah, but there were jazz guys in it too. There were jazz guys in it too.
Yeah, but it wasn't a big band.
I saw Chuck Findley there in the
Chuck
section.
Findley was on it.
Robert Hurst played the bass.
Yeah, and they had Branford Marsalis was the band leader, I think, originally, or Kevin Eubanks, one of those guys. But as far as a big band gig, That was it.
Mm.
Once the Johnny Carson show went off there, that was the end of it.
Mm.
But in Europe, as you know, Germany alone has like 3 or 4 radio bands. The
Yeah, it's
Frankfurt
amazing that.
band, yeah, Stuttgart, and of course Cologne, and it's crazy.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, it's
crazy.
embarrassing that Switzerland hasn't won anymore. So that's we had one too here in Zurich a long time. Those guys, yeah.
And Holland has the Metropole Orchestra, which is the only radio orchestra that has strings. That's basically like a string section. Wonderful orchestra, wonderful orchestra. And then they have the Millennium Jazz Orchestra, and then there's 3 or 4 there, but you don't find that in the States. Like I said, unless you're in the military, and those military bands are killing. I mean, they're real like top professional level. Except, like I said, you have to be in the military, which is that's up to you to decide.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And maybe another thing that's interesting to find your own style by writing, if there's such a thing besides trial and error and just doing your thing, is there something that you learned over the years that kind of felt natural, going into the direction that is essentially you when writing a chart?
I don't know. I don't think about. I can't think about if I'm doing something right or wrong. Jim McNeely and I were teaching at this BMI Jazz Composers Workshop. So one of the students says, "Jim, how do you become original?" So Jim says, "You steal." And it's basically, Ellington stole from somebody, Gil Evans stole from somebody. The point is, you're always stealing. You don't start off being you. You start off absorbing all this music, whether it's Mingus or Jimmy Lunsford or Basie or whoever. Eventually, hopefully, at some point, it starts to meld into something of yours. Hopefully, but it's like, I'm going to sit down and write a hit song. You can't say, I'm going to write a million seller. It doesn't work that way. So when it's really steal. I mean, everybody is stolen from somebody, and some people have never gotten out of the fact that they sound like that person, and some people have taken those influences and made something of their own. And that's it's like, it's I'm going to be an original, man.
But there are different crafts. I heard there are different crafts that. I heard there are different crafts. Like there are the guys that can write like every composer you name just to be ready for a TV spot or for whatever, and there are the guys who are just doing their thing, which probably sounds more original at the end.
Well, that's yes and no. Sometimes just because you're doing the wrong thing doesn't make it good, And my feelings in the era I was brought up in, same with people like Slide Hampton and Don Sebesky and Gil Evans too, writing for different kinds of situations. Like I've done a lot of funk and R&B and fusion projects, which I love doing. I still put my own 2 cents into it, but I really like that groove. Doesn't have to be a swing, sort of a swing idea of anything, So I wrote these recordings for Maceo Parker, who was a straight ahead, down the middle funk player. I mean, I had a great time. But if it's going to be great, you're not going to write for him that you would write for Dave Liebman, or for Joe Lovano. You're not going to do that. But you can have it. It can be just something you add to it that makes it fun. And it's just, my God. Oh my God! Messages from audience will display here. It's me. Messages. Yeah. I guess will come in. But the thing is that one of the things I try to project to students is that if a Joe Lovano comes up to you and wants to write a chart for him, you got to know the artist and how you're going to write. And or Tony Bennett comes up to you, I want you to write a vocal chart for me. You better write something that's going to make him look good. And I've run into to writers that they'll write a vocal chart as if they're the singer and you're not writing for the singer, or they're writing for you as if you were the horn player and not the other guy. So you can still write your own thing and be wrong, and you can write your own thing and be right. And then you can write. Sometimes it's fun. Like the Steve Gadd project we just did. was great, but it was all straight down the middle, kind of, groove kind of stuff. But when you have guys like Eddie Gomez and Ronnie Cuba and Steve Gadd playing it, you're right for them, and it was great. I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. And harmonically, it wasn't. You're not looking at doing anything fabulous harmonically. It was just a lot of happy jazz, whatever you want to call it. It was just a lot of fun. So, and I think it's important. Like when I wrote for Diane Reeves, it was one type of writing. When I would write for, say, Kurt Elling, it was a different type of writing, yet putting something in. When I wrote for Randy Brecker and I wrote for Tom Harrell, two different types of playing, both interesting, and both put something in it that they liked, and I can't explain what it is. If I tried, I mean, that's somebody else's job. Let them be the critic, let them be the explainer. But and I love writing for both two different kinds of players. It's really important that you understand. It's important you understand the history of you as a writer. Go back and listen to the jazz didn't start like with Miles Davis in 1960. It was 1970. It didn't start with Gil Evans with Miles. Gil was writing his ass off long before that. George Russell was writing his ass off long before that. So I mean, it's a history, and the problem is a lot of times the students don't know the history of the music that they're writing. I didn't say all of them, but sometimes you run into that problem. Okay. You don't know about Gary McFarland, you don't know about the George Russells, you don't know about the Bill Russos, and you don't know about so many other writers. It's John Carisi, wonderful writer. His famous hit is Israel. His famous original piece was Israel. But John wrote some fabulous music, man. Fabulous composer and writer. Nobody knows this guy. Nobody knows this guy. So you got to know. You really got to know that. It's like, sorry, it's my phone ringing.
There's another interview waiting for you. I can see that.
No,
any last words? Any last words? Maybe on. There's always this separation between composing, arranging, orchestrating, but for me as a layman, it's all the same. I would decide by myself if the violin and the muted trumpets would play the sharp 9 or whatever. Yeah. How do you deal with that stuff?
Well, first of all, like you said, to me, composing, arranging, it's all one thing. As an arranger, you're composing. As a composer, you're composing. But as an arranger, you're constantly composing. And as far as choices with strings in this, that's something you have to, since, again, in my case, since I never really studied formally, I just tried it. Obviously, there are books out now. The student, whoever's doing it, just needs to know, look at it. And what I used to tell my students, say, well, you don't know, you understand the brass mutes, for instance. And they say, no. I said, well, get together with a trumpet player and a trombone player. Let them go through the mutes and different sounds and tell you the registers. Same thing with reed players. So get the little tape recorder or something and record and start listening and making notes. I mean, all this is a good way to study. Get together with the rhythm section. Think about the kind of, have them play different grooves for you. Get it in your head. I mean, the one thing I can tell writers is, man, patience. You really got to have a lot of patience and try anything, man. Try anything. If somebody said, well, you're not supposed to write minor 9ths or minor 2nd, why not? In the right place, the right note in the right place is good, or the right note in the wrong place is not good. There's that line Gil Evans used to say, the right note in the wrong place is not good. Something to that effect. But just try. Man, if I want to hear something that sounds like that, I'm going to write it. I have no problem with that. And I just take my.
Yeah, it's beautiful that you're still trying and to search for new things. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. Yeah, I have to. I can't. I go crazy. Well, crazier. So. But
you have some.
That's.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Say again.
No,
I was just saying you have a lovely summer ahead, or you're working, or both, or.
Yeah. Writing some new music now.
Writing new music.
Yeah, so I'm writing the music, and I'll be in Europe quite a bit next year too. So having some conferences about some projects for next year. And I just did some charts for the Italian trumpet player Paolo Fresu,
So
who
you'll
I
be in
don't know,
Italy
but
then.
yeah, didn't go. I just sent the scores over. So I'm waiting to hear feedback. Who I don't know, I know is playing. So I'm just curious. Three, and they were all ballads, which I love doing. Beautiful Italian melodies, just gorgeous melodies, and very woodwindish, very pretty stuff. So I'm putting out some new stuff and trying to get things organized for next year already. So I'll be in Germany 2 or 3 with the WDM at least 3 or 4 times next year already.
Good to hear, yeah.
Yeah, and then plus some maybe going to Italy and other parts of Germany and maybe Sweden, I think. Oh no, yeah, maybe Sweden. I just did a commissioned piece for this big band in Sweden, in Malmo, Sweden, called the Monday Night Big Band. The title is from the Thad Mill Monday Night Big Band thing. So I just finished a piece for them and sent it over. So hopefully, that band, I was there 20 years ago. It was a really good band in Malmo. And like as everything else, the budgets, even through Germany, the budgets suffered a little bit. But everybody's hanging in, man. All those bands. Yeah. Same with the Metropole and Millennium. Johan Reinders, excellent writer. Millennium Big Band. So I love going over there. I missed when the pandemic hit. I missed the camaraderie and the travel part of it.
Sure,
I was writing the music, but I was like, oh man, I really missed the social part of it and being with the guys. So anyway, Simon, I thank you. I thank you for
Michael. I thank you for taking the time to chat with me a little bit about your passion and the beautiful music you're writing constantly.
I'll send you some tracks.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And then if we do it again, you'll have some tracks to play.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm open. Just call me anytime, man.
Do that, man. Thank you very much, Michael.
Please take care. Thank you, son.
Have a good afternoon. Bye.
You too. Ciao.